Can we start? Good morning everyone, and welcome to this IULM Flow talk entitled Beyond Greenwashing, Challenges and Opportunity in Communicating Sustainability. Today we deep dive into a crucial topic that is sustainability, that has become a cornerstone of corporate identity, as well as an important driver in stakeholder decision-making processes. However, as we all know, the challenge of distinguishing genuine sustainability efforts for mere greenwashing becomes increasingly complex task. We will talk about these important things today with our host, Elisa Flamini. Welcome, Elisa, head of the Sustainability Unit at Green Media Lab, which is a communication and ESG advisory company based in Milan. With Elisa, we will explore what lies beyond the surface, uncovering the strategies that companies may adopt to meet sustainability communication. So, Elisa, welcome, and let's start. So, who is Green Media Lab? Who is Green Media Lab, and how does it support companies when it comes to sustainability?
So thank you again, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Riccieri. I'm Elisa Flamini, as mentioned, and I'm the head of sustainability in Green Media Lab. Green Media Lab is quite a peculiar communication agency because it has two souls, two faces. One is the communication, indeed, and the other one is the ESG advisory activity. Let me share my screen with you so we can share some slides, if I may. So yeah, we are an agency based in Milan. We were born 10 years ago, and there was from the very beginning a very responsible DNA. Also thanks to our first and historical client, who is Patagonia, who kind of shapes our culture and our DNA, in fact. In 2018, we also became a certified B Corporation. And since a couple of years, we are also proud to be a B Corp Way partner. So among those industries, those companies who are allowed by the lab itself in accompanying other companies in the B Corp certification. Yeah, as I mentioned, we of course have been also shaped in our culture by Patagonia, who kind of let's say created the corporate social responsibility in the modern industry, and we were born very focused on the sport and outdoor sector, but now we are very transversal and we diversified our activities in different sectors. Yeah, maybe if I may, we could start from the let's go in the deep dive in this very crucial topic. As the professor mentioned, greenwashing has become quite one of the priorities in our days in the whole international panorama. And the reason is basically, I would start from this number that is quite scary, 53%. 53% is the percentage of environmental claims in Europe that, according to a study from the European Commission in 2020, were considered either vague, misleading, or unfounded. So what does this mean? Of course, it's as I mentioned, it's quite a big number. It means that more than half of the claims regarding products or services in Europe were in fact not saying totally the truth about, and they were declaring some environmental and social benefits that were not in fact present. So why?
Elisa, sorry to interrupt. It's somehow a sign, this percentage, right? It's a sign of companies feeling the pressure for communication, but maybe they need some support. They need the skill, knowledge, and experience to learn how to properly communicate this information. So it's an important sign, in my view. It's a very relevant number, as you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. It's a number that can be read in different ways. In fact, in our opinion, also starting considering our day-to-day job, there is among this number of misleading claims, there is a good certain number of companies that deliberately chose to deceive consumers. But there's also, and this I would say that would be the majority nowadays, a certain number of companies that actually fall into the trap of greenwashing due to a lack of knowledge, a lack of know-how. So we know that today Italy is being made mostly from small, medium enterprises, and most of them, they cannot just afford a sustainability team or a sustainability manager, for example. So most of the time, what we are experiencing is actually companies that fall into this greenwashing trap just for a lack of knowledge. And that's, as you said, it's an important sign. It's also an important sign of the need of more specialists, of more professionals in sustainability. I know that IULM is investing a lot. And so, yeah, we need professionals, and we need an increasing knowledge. But yeah,
you're right, and this is exactly why I take the opportunity to talk about the track we have implemented on sustainability in our strategic communication course, just because, as you were saying, we need professionals to work on this topic to help companies.
Yeah, in fact, and yeah, of course, given this data, this insight, it's also pretty clear why greenwashing has risen into the regulator's agenda over the last years, as I mentioned at the beginning. I guess some of us already know about the main regulations and normatives that are coming into force. Starting from the Green Claim Directive that has been proposed at the beginning of this year. And it is going to be shaped in this month and will be enforced by 2026. And also the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, so the CSRD, that actually extend the obligation of companies in drafting a sustainability report. So why am I mentioning this regulation? Because of course sustainability report is nowadays I would say the main tool for stakeholders, for also for us as a consumers to actually check into the real data and the real ESG performance of a company. So as I mentioned, as also the professor you mentioned, this phenomenon is linked with basically a need, and basically a certain percentage is the need of a company to capitalize somehow in the interest from the increasing interest of all companies as stakeholders in the sustainability topic. When I say main stakeholders, of course, I'm referring to us as a consumers. So I would say that basically most of us nowadays really believe that companies and our favorite brands that we buy at the weekly basis, they should be actually shape somehow the ESG best practices. So us as a consumers, we really have high expectations and we really request a lot now from the private sectors and from the companies. Another stakeholders that, of course, is expecting a lot is the employees. We know nowadays the value also of talent retention and talent acquisition. So it's, of course, one of the main challenges of a company who want to stay competitive in the market. And we know that 86%, so basically almost all of us, really want to work in a company, not just for the salary, of course, but because they want to work in an environment that really care and is really linked with our personal value in terms of social and environment. And last but not least, investors. So of course it's always about money. Investors believe that companies that focus on the ESG and they have a strong ESG strategy, they have better opportunities to succeed in the long term.
So actually, Elisa, it's not anymore a choice being communicating on sustainability or not. Not only because legal obligations are becoming mandatory in many different fields, from the product to generally the communication on sustainability. Regulation have been very active in these latest, in the last few years. But also because the most important stakeholders are including sustainability in their decision-making processes. So at the end, it's, as I was saying, it's not anymore a choice. They will need to undertake the journey and also learn to properly communicate this information, which are becoming more and more relevant. But as you... as in your next slide.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's again a good point. So now let's say that it's such a key success indicator that now it's not an option anymore. So the push from us, from consumers, and from all the levels of our society has become so strong that companies now, they are a very difficult position, because somehow they have either to find resources to communicate, or they really risk to be somehow be left behind in the market. So besides the legal risk due to the increasing number of regulations, now we have, of course, a reputational risk. That it's, if you want, even worse. So we know that I also come from a marketing professional, so we know that all the marketeers know their reputation is everything at the end of the day for a company. And of course, not communicating, or actually wrong communication and not correct communication, really would lead to a huge reputational damage. But I will also add a third risk, even if it's not on the slide, that it's a bit more complex, and it regards the whole economic system and the whole consumer system, that it's kind of losing trust from the consumers. So a general loss of trust from the consumers to all towards all the companies. So even the companies, the few companies that are able to really strong in their ESG performance, they decide to communicate, but somehow they face in front of them this loss of trust of consumers. And this is quite a tricky phenomenon, because it means that it's become really hard for consumers to make a responsible choice. So we know that we can somehow drive the business with our responsible choices in the supermarket. So we kind of vote with the wallet, as we say. And this loss of trust, again, it's a phenomenon that, in my opinion, is becoming more and more important. So yeah, I will not let's say define again greenwashing. It's at this point it's quite clear. So it's making an unsubstantiated claim, so a false claim, to deceive deliberately or not, as I mentioned, the consumers on some environmental benefits of a product, of a service. I would like just to add that traditionally we have always talked about sustainability referring to the environmental aspect. So that's why also greenwashing refers to the environment, so more to the ecological aspect. But nowadays, of course, we know that sustainability is way more than this, is ESG, so also the social side. So nowadays it's also correct to talk about social washing or pink washing. And we know that this is actually happening more and more, since the diversity inclusion topic has risen in the priorities also of the companies who wish to communicate their sustainability.
So it becomes really more and more relevant to, in the light of what you have been saying, which is the risk of a general loss of trust on sustainability communication. It becomes more and more relevant to be able and to have the tools, from the company side, to understand how to communicate properly, if they want to communicate properly on sustainability. But on the user side, which can be the users, can be the customers, employees, regulators, investors, it becomes really key to try to understand how we can detect greenwashing. So, if there are signs or rules or tools or methods or whatever we can use to be able to detect these communication techniques, which are, as we know, misleading.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
find this title engaging, "The Seven Sins of Greenwashing." I think it's the proper title
It's
for
like
what comes next.
self-explaining. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Over the years, basically due to again to the rise of the interest of this phenomenon is tried to be theorized, and I found quite useful, quite helpful, again, not just for us as sustainability professionals, but also as a consumer, to just go through them, because it really gives us an overview, an idea on how to recognize greenwashing, but also to understand how difficult, how hard sometimes it's really to recognize for us as a consumer greenwashing, and to avoid as a company the greenwashing. So of course there are some scenes, let's say, that are more evident, and that's, I must say, over the last years, of course, this very like obvious scenes somehow decreased, of course, because again the companies who decide to just communicate completely false information, of course, now it's thank God it's decreased a lot. But yeah, let's say that the first scene is basically a company that deliberately decided to say a wrong information. So an information that is not true, that you cannot find in any available source, and so on. But there is also another one that it's start to be a bit more sneaky, let's say, that is the one of worshipping false labels. And this basically the use somehow of visual clues that suggest some kind of certification, some labels by a non-existing third party. So by basically a non-existing certification. This might seem weird, but I think that we encountered this seen a couple of times in our life, at least. So it's usually like this kind of green leaves, something on a nice green background. That then, if you look better, now that we have internet, of course, everyone is accessible. Everything is accessible pretty easy. And if you look for it, then we find out that this certification does not exist. So every time I really encourage everyone to when we encounter a kind of label, to always look and wonder if it's certified by an independent third party. So let's take the example of B Corp, for example, of course, that is certified by the lab, that is an independent third party, or all the ISO, of course, also the EPD. So there are, of course, now, let's say that now certification, it's, I would say, maybe one of the most powerful tool in our hands as a consumer, because it's really something that it's unified, that it's official, that cannot be questioned. So really make us more aware of the importance of the certification, and the importance also for us as a consumer to always look for more information of this certification.
I think yes, because the relevance of certifications goes hand in hand with the loss of trust on communication of stakeholders. So the less they feel themselves able to understand and assess the truthfulness of what companies are communicating, the more certification gain power. So playing on this power is this second strategy that you mentioned. Because clearly, when you don't understand something, what you look for is a third-party certificator or assurer that what they're claiming is correct. So that is
exactly. For us is for sure something that it really helps us in reacquiring some of this trust level. Yes, absolutely. And then another scene is the one of no proof. It's somehow similar to fibbing, but basically is a statement that is not supported by any certification again or any accessible data. That might be true. So of course, this not always fall at the end in something that is completely false, but it's still somehow a greenwashing. And in the way, of course, us as a company, we should always give the possibility to consumer to check for this information, and is also a sign of, let's say, again, trust. So imagine a claim that says less plastic bottle, for example. So we should always wonder, okay, is this statement that actually is pretty vague? So is this statement supported by scientific evidence, by accessible data? Where can I find this data? So let's always think that sustainability, even if for a lot of years has been doubted, but sustainability is about data, is about KPIs. So ESG, we know that also the ESG rating, for example, in the bank and in investment industry, but generally is based on data. So we should always be able to find this data and this information available, publicly available. And
this Elisa, requires an important investment from the company side, meaning that to provide externally these data, which are really important, the company needs to have a system in place and be able to measure such data, which recalls what we were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's pretty challenges, and we cannot hide that it's also expensive in terms of time, so resources, time, and of course money. But this is becoming really crucial. So really the data management, the KPI, and also the dynamic data, so the possibility to continuously update this data. Imagine for the sustainability report that has been to be made yearly, has become really crucial. So again, this is an advantage for a company that cannot be postponed anymore, because now again with the CSRD and generally with the whole regulation system, it's really required for the company a correct and an updated way to manage KPIs and ESG data. And is an investment for sure. And then we go again, this one of those category of scenes that are harder to recognize. And one of these is for sure the hidden trade-off. So hidden trade-off means failing for a company, avoiding to report wider negative externalities. So what do we mean with that? Imagine walking into a store and to see a T-shirt that says 100% natural cotton. So the information per se is not wrong. Of course, cotton is a natural substance, but don't forget that also arsenicum is natural, for example. So why to stress the fact that cotton is natural, while actually the real impact of cotton, compared to the organic cotton, for example, it's huge in terms of, for example, is one of the most water-intensive crop. It requires a huge amount of chemicals for the harvesting, for keeping the crop. So basically, what I mean here is that we should always wonder when a company decided to communicate something about a product, we should always wonder, okay, maybe it sounds really, really nice. Everyone like to wear natural substances because it feels that it's good for us and for the planet. But we should always think about the real externalities of that product. So in this case, again, what are the negative environmental and social impact of the whole process, for example? So I mentioned some indication of the supply chain of the cotton and the way it's produced, but I'm also mentioning, for example, the worker conditions, for example, that cotton requires, that usually are not exactly responsible somehow. But yeah, again, this is, of course, it's not easy. It really requires a kind of change in our also mindset. So not just looking at some claim, but always wondering what's next, what's behind that.
Yeah, this is more like a scene that relates to providing non-complete information. It's about completeness at the end. It's about not providing all the information that relate to sustainability in regard to this specific fabric in the example you posed.
Exactly. And forgetting about maybe the most important impacts at the end. And then for sure, I would say from our experience, the one that we encounter the most, face the most, is the vagueness scene. That is basically, as the word itself calls, is a basic unclear statement that might be misunderstood by the most of the consumer. So imagine a recyclable, for example, as a claim. Is completely vague. I mean, it doesn't tell us in which percentage, it doesn't tell us in which part of the product, because usually, of course, product is composed by different parts. It doesn't say if it refers to the product or maybe the packaging. So again, vagueness, it's easy to avoid at the end for company, but it's really frequent nowadays, because it's just easy when we don't have enough data, or maybe when we don't like the data. It's really easy just to say a vague information. And then we have another one that, like the previous one, is quite tricky. That is the lesser of two evils. This scene refers to a communication that could distract somehow the consumer from a bigger problem. And this, again, might be similar to the hidden trade-off, but also different in the way it's something that it's true. So it's not that natural cotton that at the end doesn't mean anything, but it's true, but somehow is hiding a bigger problem behind it. So imagine a company, and this is a very relevant example because I think it's one of those that are really hard to avoid for a company. A company that decides to make a big investment and make their product, a new launch, carbon neutral. So of course they make their homework, let's say, so they made the life cycle assessment, they reduced as much as they can the impact, and they at the end make it carbon neutral. Again, it's a big investment, so I'm not saying that it's wrong, but just ask in this case, okay, this is great, but since we are talking about carbon neutrality, what is the company doing to tackling, to reduce and at the end compensate their whole climate strategy, their whole emissions, their whole impact as an organization? So what are they doing in terms of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3? So how do they manage their direct and indirect emissions at organizational level? Consider that for most of the industries, for some it's really like extreme, but generally I would say for everyone, scope 3, so the indirect emission, greenhouse gas emissions, compose the majority of their emissions. So of course it's really hard to tackle this. But if a company launch a carbon neutral product and they don't even started to at least collect the data and at least start to reduce their scope 1, 2, and 3, it's really not consistent to launch a product that is carbon neutral, that maybe in terms also of revenues, in terms of their business, covers just a small percentage of it. So it's really irrelevant to make this product carbon neutral if you don't have, let's say, a consistent approach and you don't have a solid climate strategy. So again, I realize that it is not easy and it requires a lot for a company, but always think as a company to really approach ESG sustainability and then, of course, ESG communication in just a very consistent way, a very ethical and responsible way. So in this case, I'm not saying that companies should not launch carbon neutral products, but just always think at the bigger picture. And then we have the last sin that, again, is pretty frequent, like vagueness, and it's the irrelevance. So it's a company that decides to communicate truthful but unimportant information. So some information, some data that might be true, but are definitely not important. So imagine a company who decide to display on their hairspray, for example, CFC free, so chlorofluorocarbon free. Chlorofluorocarbon is a substance, some of us may remind it, that was found to be the major contributor to the ozone hole. And that's why it was banned at the beginning of 90s in the Montreal Protocol. So why should a company communicate this? That basically is a regulation requirement, so it's a normative obligation. So it's not really something that a company should be proud of because they're just doing what they're obliged to do. So why to communicate? Okay, maybe this is a very specific example, but trust me that it happens a lot. Also for some products, for example, that for the European Union cannot be tested on animals, but still companies decide to communicate that the product is not tested on animals. Why? It's just a normative obligation, so really not something that a company should communicate. So again, of course, this is, again, it's not, it might seem as something irrelevant, but at the end of the day, it tells a lot, about a company, let's say, correctness, and a company need to be ethical and responsible. So at the end, I know that it's a lot of information, and it's not easy also for us as a consumers to remind all these points. But at the end, for us as a sustainability professional, what we recommend at the end of the day to our clients or to our partner is just to have a very consistent approach, as I mentioned before. So to really start from the broader picture, so to start from the basement, like if we have to build a house, and start developing an ESG strategy that is meaningful, that is measurable, and that is comprehensive. And after that, of course, a company have the tool, the power to start from some small actions, some action that though are meaningful for your business. So that's what I mentioned also earlier. A company should not just start make some action that are quick wins, so are easy to achieve and then to communicate, but really start from the relevant impact for your company and for your industry, and also be very transparent. So also communicate not just your successes, but also what you are working on it. So just say, okay, I don't have so much results on my climate strategy, for example, but I'm telling you that I'm starting to collect data, for example, and that's there's nothing bad in it. Actually, it's really, really appreciated also from consumers that are always more and more conscious about that. And then communicate just at the end of this process. So just after having a strong ESG strategy and after having at least started some small actions. So communicate ESG at the end is also a matter of timing, is a matter of consistency, and but it's also true that in some cases companies do not really have an option to wait, because as you know, there are some actors that are involved in the supply chain of companies that with the due diligence, for example, with the due diligence normative, are now obliged to give a lot of information. So in some cases, communicate, at least not to the public, but at least to some stakeholders, is becoming an obligation. So that's why it's really important to anticipate as much as we can and to be prepared to collect data and to have a strong sustainability strategy.
And Elisa, if we look at go back to your slides, of course, the theoretically optimal approach would be to start from the strategy, as you were saying, defining objectives, measurable targets, planning the actions, and then reporting. That would be the ideal managerial process from the strategy to communication. However, it is also true that many companies are doing vice versa, meaning they want to communicate something, they start to communicate something that is helping them to develop a reasoning on sustainability, trying to understand what is relevant to communicate for stakeholder, and maybe going backward, meaning what should I communicate? I should communicate on environmental impacts. I should communicate on waste. And starting from the need of communication backwards to trying to figure out what is a strategy that they could use to improve in the amount of waste that the company produce, for instance. However, I mean, if it's true that there can be two paths from strategy to communication and from communication to strategy, it is also true that when they use the path you were highlighting from strategy to communication is of better quality, as we can say. No, it is.
Absolutely.
It comes from a more genuine approach. You find more measures which are relevant.
And is less questionable. So it's true, as you say, that it's correct. So like practically speaking, it happens a lot that companies say, okay, whatever, I just really need to communicate to my public, to my stakeholders, something that is interesting. In this case, for example, over the last years, we know that talking about environment, we know that climate change, so emissions, now we know that it's something that is extremely sensitive, so something that is extremely interesting for all the public. So now companies say, okay, I really want to communicate that I'm doing something for my climate strategy, for my emissions. So I start from this in mind to then go backwards and then start with my climate strategy to tackle scope 1, 2, and 3. This is also definitely an approach. Of course, it's not the most correct, but we have to face the truth of the reality at the end of the day. Again, I cannot say that it's wrong by per se. Of course, if a company, so again, we have a panorama made of small, medium enterprises, so a lot of family businesses. What I found is that if a founder, so if the property of a company really believe in the sustainability, so whatever the communication might be, so if they really believe in this and they really start from the box number 1, I really found an approach that is completely different, extremely more effective, extremely more successful at the end, and also quicker. Because if, from our experience, when we support our clients, we found that really having the board engaged, the CEO engaged, really may accelerate the whole process incredibly. And so that means that maybe you can take 1 year instead of 3 in making your strategy strong enough to communicate in an effective way and really like protected, let's say, from the greenwashing.
It is what we call in the literature on sustainability and in general of governance, that is called tone at the top. So when the tone at the top is in line with something, that something happens more quickly. Also because, not only because it's the top management that makes the strategy, but also because it helps building a culture for sustainability in the organization. So as we know, from our managerial study, when managers look at top management, which can be the entrepreneur, or top managers in bigger companies, when they look at something, all the people in the organization start to look at the same thing. So it is something that becomes more and more wider, let's say. Our values that becomes more and more wider and embedded in the organization. And that, I think, it's a very important ingredient for undertaking a journey in sustainability. The commitment of the top of the company makes a big difference.
Yeah, you touched a very relevant point, the company culture. That's absolutely true. So if there is the board commitment, then there is it's pretty easy, not easy, but it's way faster to permeate, to build a company's culture that is really responsible, where everyone is engaged, first of all, and so everyone makes his own part at the end, because as we know, as we said a lot of time, ESG and sustainability, it's not in the it's not in the hands of the sustainability manager or the CEO. It's in the hands of really all the departments, all the functions, all the people in the organization. It's like that. Imagine just talking about ESG, the S, so the social side. Imagine so the workers, for example. This is everything in the hand of HR. Imagine the environment, so all the parts related to emissions and waste. This is in the hands of logistics, of the procurement. Imagine all about again communication, so responsible communication, that it's in the hand of marketing. So they also have to have some knowledge, and they have to be committed. So really, ESG is so transversal. That's a real responsible company culture is really key. So yeah, that's a very good point. So yeah, I also mentioned earlier, just to conclude somehow, about general risk that somehow we forgot about. And it regards this phenomenon for which companies that are really virtuous from an ESG point of view, they decide for some reason to not communicate. So they are the so-called silent green firms. So have good ESG performance, but they don't communicate. So why it's happening, we already said that, is because they're afraid. They're afraid to receive complaints, to receive bad comments from their community, from the consumers, and they are afraid to fall into the greenwashing, because again, as we just said and we just seen, greenwashing at the end of the day, it's a very impetuous path. It's not so linear, and so companies are just afraid to not say the right thing in the right time. But again, this is really crucial. This is something that we have to tackle as a sustainability professional, because it's as I mentioned, it's crucial to make and to allow stakeholders and consumers to make the right choice, the responsible choice. So we really have to support those companies, so the silent green firms, and of course also the other ones, to communicate, to be vocal, because again, we, as we also seen in the three boxes, if you have a strong and if you're really committed in your sustainability strategy, even if you're not perfect, no one is perfect. Also, Patagonia say we are unsustainable because we produce materials that are made of chemicals, because they have to resist 3,000 meters in the mountain. So we cannot avoid the use of chemicals. So in this sense, we are unsustainable, but we do everything that we can to reduce our negative impact and to create a positive environmental and social impact. And that's, at the end of the day, the right approach, for everyone, not just for Patagonia. So there are no perfect first-class companies. There are just companies that decide to tackle and to face the sustainability challenge in either a responsible and, let's say, ethical way, or in a non-ethical way. And that's, at the end of the day, the right approach. And we, as a sustainability professional, we really have to support that transition, to support that flow. So I would like just to conclude with just a few examples. So Professor, just interrupt me if you want to add something before. So again, why greenwashing is okay? Somehow, sometimes for a company to fall into greenwashing as just a limited impact. Let's say it's just a lack of being transparent towards your consumer, and of course also to pay some fees. But of course, there are cases for the biggest companies, cases of greenwashing that lead to a tremendous impact at all levels. So and through a lot of stakeholders. Imagine what happened this year, this scandal that was pretty known, the Verra scandals. So Verra is the world's leading carbon standard certifier. So there's this logo, pretty famous, that is the verified carbon standard. And they, what has been found, what was shocking, is that 90% of the Verra rainforest carbon credits, they were not portraying the reality. So they were not real carbon credits that were reducing emissions. They were the so-called phantom credits, so not existing credits. So the percentage is basically the one that we see on the right, that out of 94.9 million of carbon credits that were issued and claimed, just 5.5 million, so really the percentage is crazy, were the real emission reduction. But imagine in this case, of course, this was really huge. But imagine the effect that this greenwashing case has led to everyone, because the Vera clients, say who was buying these carbon credits, all the biggest companies, of course, multinational companies, that they are already obliged to have to reduce because of the industry they belong to. They are obliged to reduce their carbon emissions. So they were doing their homework, they were tackling the climate strategy, reducing their emissions, but also buying the carbon credits for that amount of emission that they could not reduce because they are typical of the business. So imagine that means that these huge scandals meant that basically what we thought that was the actual reduction at worldwide level was not true. So, and that's again, since we are talking about the COP is just finished, we are talking about the importance of the carbon greenhouse gas emissions in tackling the climate change. Again, of course, this is the topic of this decennial, the topic of the future. And of course, this was a big phenomenon, big scandalous. Another example is the one of Ryanair. Again, when we let's say when we face a company that belongs to a critical industry, so like fashion, oil and gas, and actually also the industry of Ryanair, so the flying sector, we really have to be extremely careful. So I'm not saying that we have to leave no one behind, because that's not the right approach, because of course that's are the most impactful industry and somehow we have to tackle this. But if all the companies have to be careful in communicating their sustainability, those companies have to be even more careful. So Ryanair made a very big statement 3 years ago and declared to be the Europe's lowest emission airline. So quite a bold statement. But at the end, they were in fact accused, and they had to also to pay quite a big fee because they were presenting all data. They were not considering some major flight companies in their documents, in their graphics, in their data. And they were also making, I don't know if deliberately or not, some wrong calculation. So again, this is just to show that this is happening quite a lot. Again, maybe now is the number. I hope that will decrease in the future. But again, sometimes, as I mentioned, the companies, they don't do it on purpose, they don't do it deliberately, but maybe in this case, and also in the case of Verra, for sure, of course, this was a deliberately action.
It's really good to have this example, I think, Elisa, just to see in reality the what happens when it comes to greenwashing. So yeah, and also this one, I think it's very interesting. This one you
Yeah,
presented
exactly.
now.
Of course, Professor, I think that what will be even more interesting in the future is when we will have the green claim directive ready. For sure, we will have another discussion maybe on this topic. So nowadays, since it's just a proposal, we don't know exactly what will be in this normative. But what we can say, and this again is not an official source, but it's just our observation as a Green Media Lab ESG unit. There are some tricks, there are some suggestions that we always make to our clients, to our partners. Again, it's our consideration. Just to make the communication, the ESG communication, the most as more as responsible as we can. For example, avoid like those tricky words like eco-friendly, environmentally friendly, green, sustainable, because these words at the end of the day that don't really mean anything, just because a company, as I mentioned, just for the fact of being in a business, they cannot have a zero impact, like it's for definition. Even the most responsible one, they have an impact, they do have an impact. So just replace this approach with something more practical. So with in the right, I put some certification that are really appreciated, as we saw at the beginning of our talk. So make use of all the certification as much as we can, and also replace like those general, those impactful words with something that is more specific. For example, instead of zero impact, let's say net zero or carbon neutral, and maybe specify with a caveat that you have, for example, made an APD, a life cycle assessment. Or instead of saying environmentally friendly, again, a company is not a friend of the environment by itself, just say that you have, for example, a reduced environmental impact, and so on. So this is basically a very concrete approach.
Thank you, Elisa. And before we move to the next example, we have a question from the public. And the question is, in what way do awareness and interest from key stakeholders influence the central role of sustainability practices in the private sector? So,
Yeah,
well,
let's
on some point we addressed this issue at the beginning, but maybe we can elaborate more on the influence of on stakeholders according to your
yeah.
view.
Absolutely. Yeah, as we mentioned, I really believe that the stakeholders and all the, especially I would say the final user, the consumers, are really pushing, have been pushed over the last years, sustainability practices in the private sector. So really, to answer the question, it does really influence a lot, enormously. Of course, the role of institution, it's crucial, obviously, like it's something that is a sine qua non condition, but I think that it's right, the push, the influence from let's say from the bottom, that really makes the institution accelerate or not in a certain topic. So in this particular case, I really believe that the fact that in few years the CSRD was shaped, and the green claim, especially the green claim directive, has been proposed, is definitely for the huge interest and the push from the stakeholders. Absolutely.
And I also, if I can add, believe that there's a growing competence that stakeholders are now having in regards to sustainability. And that also is in terms of, let's say, awareness. I'm just rephrasing the word that was in the question from the public. The more and more stakeholders are competent on sustainability, the more they can have a power on highlighting the pitfalls or the need for improving sustainable practices in the company. So the more power they will have. It also depends on the powerfulness of the stakeholder the relevance, let's say, that that stakeholder has on the company. Of course, when all customers are focusing on some sustainability features of the product, if customers raise a hand, that is a powerful stakeholder talking. Let's say you cannot ignore customers, of course, as you cannot ignore investors, as you cannot ignore employees. So it also comes to the relevance of the stakeholder and the stakeholders' competence on sustainability, of course.
I agree.
But thank you for the question. I think it was a good opportunity to clarify some points. So questions are welcome always.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
And now maybe we move to another example, which the last one, which I really, I think it's really,
I think that, because
it's really,
sometimes it's just hard from the theory, maybe, okay, it sounds pretty clear, but at the end of the day, we really must be able to face the reality, and so that's why I put this example, just because, again, it's just like the flight company. We are talking about quite a critical industry, of course, that is the single-use plastic. Again, I'm not saying that all the companies that belong to difficult to hard industries, they should be left behind, but as we said, maybe they should be slightly more silent and slowly shifting to a different business model at the end of the day. We know that, for example, for water, we know that there are a lot of solutions for solution that feel like purify the water, that don't need to be the plastic bottle. So in this case, for example, San Benedetto made this product that is actually pretty spread, that is this eco green bottle. And as we see, basically it envelops all the scenes that we kind of share today. Again, maybe not deliberately, was just, of course, they just really wanted to communicate some real positive characteristics, feature of their product, but they definitely maybe went a bit too far. So we can see, for example, that there are like those three keywords that are definitely too generic and they don't mean a lot. So, for example, is 100 eco, that doesn't mean a lot, and there is like a background of a green leaf. There is 100% recycled plastic bottle, that it might be correct. In fact, is in orange and not red, but it definitely requires more information, because plastic bottle is not made of plastic, but is made of plastics, because it's made of three different types of plastics, for example. So the bottle itself, the envelope, and the tape at the top. So, for example, this might be true, but it doesn't say if it involves all the plastics. Or 100% carbon neutral. Again, this might be true, but I would be curious to know if the companies has also made a real effort in tackling their emission at organizational level. And then there's also like those tricky words that we definitely recommend to our client to carefully use. That is like eco-green or CO2 zero impact. That again, it's definitely too vague, and again, for a product that is so impactful by itself, that is again the plastic product, it's really maybe too much to define it like eco-green and to say protected the nature with us, just because again I would expect that San Benedetto, and probably they are doing it, they are also starting to try at least to shift their business model into something different at the end of the day. Because just remember that Italy is one of the countries where we have the best water in our tap, in terms of quality. So the need of these plastic bottles and this use of massive use, because imagine that we are number 2 in the world after Mexico in terms of usage of plastic bottles, of mineral water plastic bottle. So maybe as a company, as San Benedetto, I really trust and really hope that they're also trying to really shift their business model. So yeah, I think that's it's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you for the insights that comes from practice that you gave us today. I believe they were really interesting for our audience, and I hope we will have more session on sustainability and greenwashing coming up in our talk in the future. I am wondering if there are further questions from the public. Let's see. If not, we will say to our audience goodbye. Okay, no other question at the moment. We will have another session maybe if we get many more questions to which we will be able to reply.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you all for the invitation. And it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for everyone for staying with us for this hour, and see you soon again in our IULM Talk Flows.
Thank you. Bye.